সবাইকে শুভেচ্ছা। আজকে অনুষ্ঠানটা ইংরেজিতেই হবে, কাজে আমি ইংরেজিতেই বলবো, তবে তারপরে প্রশ্ন উত্তরের সময় আমরা বাংলা ইংরেজি যেভাবে খুশি করতে পারি। Thank you all for being here. This started some time ago. In a sense, it started on the 16th of July with the killing of Abu Said, the response the nation had, what Abu Said meant to us, and what he continues to mean to us, and what hopefully he will lead us into. So we'd gotten in touch with Forensic Architecture. Of course, I knew of the organization. It has a fantastic reputation, but I first came across them when I saw in Amsterdam at the Old Church the multimedia production on the killing of of Shirin Abu Akleh, which was really very, very powerful. And it gripped me at that time, and I hadn't at that time considered that we would have to repeat something of that sort. But the important thing was that that was being denied by the Israeli government. And when I saw the program, I knew through this there was no way could a government or anyone else deny that had happened faced with that evidence. So once Abu Said died, we had a similar sort of situation. We had the denial by the government. We had a young man and many others arrested on false premises. And of course, that denial was part of what has continued to happen, or what had happened throughout that regime. We had, on that day itself, we were showing the Bangladesh Press Photo Contest 2020, it was 2023. And on our walls were images that our photojournalists had taken, which, again, the government had denied. And we were, through our work, challenging that position. And that is what Drik has throughout done. We have constantly bucked that trend. We have stood up. We have resisted. We have said things that needed to be said when it was needed to be said, despite the repression, despite the obvious threats. I remember when we first did the Bangladesh Press Photo Contest in 2023, the images of 2022, the winning image was that of a little girl, Safia, a 7-year-old girl, weeping at a press conference for her father. She had never met her father. She was in her mother's womb when he had been disappeared, and has never seen him in his life. That powerful image became the lead image and a poster which went all across. And of course, it created a huge response. It also elicited response from the Rapid Action Battalion, which kept ringing us every day, making threatening phone calls, and trying to make life very difficult for us. But we've continued. Despite that, we've continued throughout. And this place was an oasis during that time of resistance. This was the one place where you could stand up straight, you could breathe up, you could stand tall and say things that you could not say anywhere else, and where people would be given that space to be saying things which could not be said elsewhere. In a sense, I would say it represented all of that. That defiance was what epitomized that young man. And in a sense, what we do through what we're doing now is pay homage to an incredible human being who gave his life for this nation. Today, as I was saying, we approached forensic architecture in November, and we started talking about the process, what might be done, and we had initial ideas of how it might proceed. It took a long time, and of course, we sort of improvised along the way. They're coming here. This screening is very much part of that process. You will, perhaps some of you will already seen it. There's an exhibit at level 2, which we will see at the end of the talk. But also, the production that we are about to see right now will be given on permanent loan to the July Museum to have on permanent display. It will be given to the public. What we also hope is that this evidence can be used by the prosecutors in bringing Sheikh Hasina and her regime to justice. So I won't talk more about that. The person who's speaking today is Jumanah Bawazir. She's a researcher, multidisciplinary designer, and poet in her own practice. She trained as an architect at the Architectural Association in London. Her work at Forensic Architecture focuses on the overlay of open source research and digital modeling to bring forth civil investigations that confront state narratives. Her own research weaves together storytelling, film, and poetry as forms of collaboration and communication to confront the spatial politics of exile. She's previously taught at the Architectural Association Summer School, worked in architectural practices, and has exhibited her work at the Qatar Foundation in Ramallah, as well as the 2023 Sharjah Biennale as a collaborative artist. Jumanah.
So I have a quick presentation, but right before that, we'll watch the film that we're showing downstairs that we launched yesterday. It's on, yeah? So this is the killing of Abu Sayyid in collaboration with Forensic Architecture and Drik. On the 16th of July, 2024, outside Begum Rokeya University in Rangpur, Bangladesh, a student was shot and killed by police officers during a protest. His name was Abu Sayyid. The July protests started as a mass student demonstration across Bangladesh in response to the government's decision to reinstate a quota system for public sector jobs. Frustrated with the inequality and diminishing economic opportunities, protesters called for a reformed quota structure. Led by students, these protests expanded to encompass widespread frustration with the Bangladeshi government. Abu Sayyid was at the forefront of these protests.
এখানে আমরা অনুষ্ঠান করতে সমাবেশ করতেছি এখানে কোনো প্রকার আমাদের সাধারণ শিক্ষার্থী বিশৃঙ্খলা করে নাই কিন্তু ওনারা আসার কারণে এই বিশৃঙ্খলা হয়েছে এই দায়ভার সাধারণ শিক্ষার্থীদের না
Abu Sayyid was killed 3 days after this interview. Following his death, Bangladesh's Prime Minister at the time, Sheikh Hasina, denied the state's responsibility.
আবু সাইদের গায়ে রাবার বুলেট লেগেছে পুলিশ কখনো মেটাল বুলেট ব্যবহার করে নাই সব রাবার বুলেট
Across a number of interviews, Hasina claimed Abu Sayyid was killed by a rock thrown by protesters. Police had only rubber bullets during the incident, and Abu Sayyid's fellow protesters took 4 to 5 hours to take him to the hospital. Together with Drik Picture Library in Dhaka, Forensic Architecture conducted a visual analysis to investigate the circumstances and claims surrounding Abu Sayyid's death. His killing was documented by several cameras. Camera 1, Camera 2, Camera 3, Camera 4. The duration of the footage is marked on this timeline. We synchronized these cameras and located them within our 3D reconstruction of the site. Footage from Camera 1, a CCTV camera near the entrance of Begum Rokeya University, provided an uninterrupted recording of the event around Gate 1. At 2:12 p.m., we observe protesters visible on the street outside the gate, and police can be seen surrounding the university gate, using it as a base. An officer fires his weapon towards protesters just off camera. Witnesses report that he was firing at Abu Sayyid, who appears on camera moments later. He walks in the direction of the gate, and police officers begin to surround him. Throughout the beating, Abu Sayyid can be seen with his hands up. From a closer vantage point, a photojournalist captured a sequence of still images clearly showing Abu Sayyid with a bamboo stick in one hand and his arms raised. He is assaulted by at least 5 officers, and he does not attempt to use his stick. The police officers then move back into the university. Over a minute after the beating, blood is visible on the back of his neck. Then, more police officers move into the university. At 2:15 p.m., a protester on a megaphone speaker appeals to the police not to shoot at them. Just over a minute later, protesters surge forward and force open the gate to their university. Immediately afterwards, officers move forward with firearms drawn, and protesters begin to withdraw, but Abu Sayyid remains in his position. This police officer charges forward, aims his weapon, and takes the first shot. We modeled the positions of the police officer and Abu Sayyid and found the shot was fired from a distance of 14.2 meters. The weapon is a 12-gauge shotgun, and the shotgun cartridge is visible on the floor around the officers. This cartridge matches the type of weapon used and is likely the same kind that was fired from the gun that shot Abu Sayyid. Each cartridge contains lead birdshot and holds approximately 360 pellets per shell, and is prescribed by international human rights conventions, directly contradicting Sheikh Hasina's claim that rubber bullets were used. According to a UN report on the protests, the physician's own examination of the medical evidence, including photos of the body, found shotgun wounds with at least 40 metal pellets on the right side of his chest and 50 on the left. The ground was also scattered with empty tear gas shell casings, indicating the use of multiple weapons. According to the police regulations of Bengal, an order to fire upon a crowd should be regarded as an extreme measure. Abu Sayyid was standing still, baring his chest and exposing his vulnerability. This heat map shows just how isolated he was from the rest of the protesters. By the time Abu Sayyid was shot, the crowd had already dispersed, and no warning was given before live fire was used. In this camera from Jumanah TV, we can clearly see that Abu Sayyid was isolated and not part of a crowd when he was shot. Furthermore, footage from the moment Abu Sayyid was first shot captures the imprint of the shot on his t-shirt. By tracing the extent of its spread, we can then ascertain the trajectory of the first shot. Six seconds after, 2 officers take aim. The second shot is fired at 2:17 and 26 seconds. The third shot follows just immediately after. We also reconstructed the trajectories of the second and third shots. Shot 2, Shot 3. Abu Sayyid is then captured in this film on the other side of the road with blood visible on his face. He then collapses and is taken to the hospital by protesters at 2:18 p.m. According to his death certificate, he was brought dead to the hospital at 3:05 p.m., 47 minutes after he was carried to hospital. This directly contradicts the Prime Minister's claim that protesters took 4 to 5 hours to get him to the hospital. We were able to confirm that 2 of the 3 shots hit Abu Sayyid. The first hit his abdomen. The second is likely to have also hit his abdomen. And the third shot hit his face. Our analysis shows that Abu Sayyid was a victim of a deliberate extrajudicial killing by the police. Our findings also refute the claims that Abu Sayyid was struck by rubber bullets or killed by a rock thrown by protesters. Abu Sayyid's killing came to symbolize Sheikh Hasina's brutal repression of the protest movement. She resigned her position and fled Bangladesh on the 5th of August. In honor of the July protests, the day became known as the 36th of July, 2024.
Thank you for being here today and for watching this together. So today my presentation will go through a little bit on the case that we just watched, Subverting State Narrative, Community Experts in Counterforensics. My name is I Jumanah Bawazir. I'm an advanced researcher at Forensic Architecture. And I will be talking about this case, but I will be talking about other cases as well that we're working on at FA, one of which Shahidul mentioned at the beginning, which is the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh in Jenin in the West Bank by Israeli forces. So I want to talk about counterforensics in this context of collaboration. Collaboration between organizations, between people, between data points, between cameras. Collaboration as this interscalar practice. And through this visualization, which is essentially, what you see on screen is a very generic visualization. It's a cube in the center and surrounded by these spheres that are these data points. The cube is either an object, a space, your project, a thought. It's really anything. And the data points, the spheres around it, are at random distances and locations. They could be viewed as individuals. They could be viewed as different practices, at different cameras. And they all are in relevance to the cube. All data points have a different perspective to the cube. And together they generate the full 3-dimensional image. It is generic so that we could kind of think of this idea in different scales, in different contexts as well. So I want to ask today, what are the forms of collaboration? What are the tools and methodologies as researchers, as activists? As architects, as designers, that we could use to subvert state narratives. But first of all, what is forensic architecture and what are counterforensics? So forensic is derived from forensis, which is Latin to pertaining to the forum. The forum is the open court or the public. And the Roman forum that forensis refers to was a space of politics, law, and economy combined. But the meaning of the word has shifted since then. While police forensics is a disciplinary project that affirms the power of states, the direction of the forensic gaze could also be inverted and used instead to detect and interrupt state violations. Civilian investigations are therefore a counter-forensic practice. So at Forensic Architecture, we use counter-forensic methodologies to investigate police shootings, war crimes, environmental and racial violence. We're made up of a multidisciplinary team of researchers and architects, activists, lawyers, journalists. And we often, and we work together. We work all around the world. And our work, specifically in Palestine, has intensified in the last 2 years since the genocide. And I'll get to that at some point in this presentation. I'll speak a little bit about methodology first. So one of the most powerful weapons a civilian can carry is his smartphone. And this was touched on yesterday in the launch of the exhibition when we were talking about counter-surveillance. So conflicts are no longer in the hands of professional journalists, and the story no longer needs to be controlled by states or mass media outlets. Civilians have turned into activists as they recognize the power of the image and use it in real-time storytelling. The means of collecting photographic evidence has been massively decentralized, and today social media bears collective witness to incidents. Sorry. What you're seeing on the screen is collective evidence of nearly 1,000 cases of police brutality during the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. So more methodologies we use are techniques of geolocation and 3D modeling. We could begin to synchronize and place open source images in time and space. So this was a process of geolocation in our investigation of the attack on Rafah in 2014. You start to identify the same area, the same spaces from different perspectives, from the satellite imagery and from a video that was taken, and you start making these connections between the two. So this technique helps us understand locations in relation to each other. So on the screen you see the camera scope of the frame, and within the image we can identify where the buildings are from each point. So this technique was actually incredibly important in our investigation in Gaza today, while collecting evidences. And this type of work becomes crowdsourced evidence, where we can tap into people's views and witnessing of this event, and basically forensics turns space into evidence. Other times the problem is a lack of access to footage. In reconstructing the prison of Saydnaya, FA had to also rely on the memories of the victims held there, except then it was only through their senses. What they could hear, what they could feel, their surroundings, and they were able to make the site visible for the first time. This was memory recollection through sensual experiences. They focused on acute sound and very, very little sight. This is what we call a situated testimony. This is one version of a situated testimony that focuses on the senses. But there are many, many versions of this because of how different each case is, how different memory is, and how it manifests within each case. Models can also be used to uncover temporal information, where shadows in images act as clocks that could be matched in our 3D software. Here we are also able to accurately identify time within images and videos that we we collect. This technique was also used in the case of Abu Sayyid to verify our findings, to verify his position. We made sure that the 3D model had the exact time and place while in the process of reconstruction. So that when we started adding the individuals and each actor into the space, we were able to verify it with the shadows as well. We also work with communities directly through situated testimony. So this is another version of situated testimony. Now, I'm sure everyone has seen this image on October the 17th, 2023. An explosion took place in the courtyard of Al Ahli Hospital in Gaza. And according to the Gaza Health Ministry, 471 people were killed and 342 people were injured. In the doctor's press conference at a nearby hospital, Al Shifa Hospital, the surgeon, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, spoke, and this is the image. And in April 2024, FA met with Dr. Abu Sitta to reconstruct the events of the night of the 17th of October, as he had experienced them and using this interview practice of the situated testimony. This is, in this case, the interview, we worked with the witnesses using the 3D model to retrace his steps through the 3D reconstruction of the hospital compound, and in this case, we had geolocated and photo-matched visual evidence recorded by survivors of the blast, including evidence that Dr. Abu Sitta himself recorded, as well as other journalists. So this is a still image from the video of the aftermath of the blast recorded by Dr. Hassan, placed into the 3D reconstruction. So the 3D reconstruction is what you see outside the frame of the photograph. His testimony of the blast entailed three modes of witnessing. Direct witnessing, he was an ear and eye witness. He was an expert witness. He was able to interpret physical injuries, understanding the types of weapons that can inflict them. And also in Gaza since October, hospitals have functioned as shelters and nodes of connection for civil society. Medical professionals have also become secondary witnesses, passing on testimonies shared with them by civilians from surrounding neighborhoods about the conditions across the besieged strip. So states have this asymmetrical access to information and a means of investigation that they use to obscure and manufacture narratives in their favor, and imposing a kind of monopoly over truth. So civilian investigations and inquiries with lesser means and sources, and community collaborations and reconstructions of 3D models provide a strong base through which we can analyze events of violence. So now I'll go, these were kind of the methodologies that we use, and now I'll go into speaking more about the case of Abu Sayyid. As mentioned, collaboration is a strong focus point in this presentation. We're here today because of the collaboration between FA and Drik, which we're honored to work on this investigation. And if you remember the visualization at the beginning of the presentation, you can imagine that FA and Drik are two of the spheres looking at the cube from different perspectives to come together for this investigation. One of the first steps of the investigation was geolocation, which is what I mentioned when talking about Rafah. So while media reports placed the incident near Begum Ruqayya University in Rangpur, this was very useful for us, but our goal is to identify the precise location for an accurate reconstruction. And to do this, we began our first mode of collaboration, which is the photogrammetry reconstruction. And I'll get to actually what that is a bit more detail in a second. It's basically a technique that turns photographs into 3D models. So we flew a drone. Drik flew a drone on the street and took lots and lots of photographs. And here you can see the 3D model created through the photogrammetry. All those blue squares are actually every photograph that was taken of the site. And we use photogrammetry as a methodology because, and to reconstruct the site, because it's accurate to the millimeter, if done very well. And photogrammetry itself also works as a collaboration. It's a collaboration between cameras coming together to form the model. So this was the result of the model. And you can see this is there where the gate is. The gate 1 of the university. And the process of understanding images in relation to space, we have to try and go through this critical analysis of reading the image. We learn to deconstruct the frame, ask what's visible, what's hidden, in order to place it in its wider context. So this is a photo match. The photo match placed into the space of the model. The model doesn't just show the environment, it helps us break the frame. We're no longer limited to the photographer's point of view. Instead, we can see what's outside the frame, where the camera was, and how the scene was constructed. Then when we triangulate through repeating this process with all the cameras on the scene, and this is kind of a sketch of where the cameras were, we're able to accurately reconstruct each and every individual into the model. So Abu Sayyid's position, every police officer, this is actually a screenshot of the first shot that was taken. This is where each police officer, from the extents of the camera that could see, were all placed. But actually, if you think about it, if they're in the second and third shots, you see way more police officers come into the scene. But these police officers are what the cameras could see. And actually, if we had more cameras that showed the university from the inside, it wasn't necessarily needed for the investigation, but I'm sure we would be able to see way more police officers. So this is the result of the camera. Cameras placed in the space. And these cameras weren't just aligned in space, they were also synchronized in time. And what we found through this investigation was clear. And as you saw at the beginning, when we showed the film, Abu Sayyid was shot at 3 times by police using lead bird shot. Images of his body, verified by a report from the UN, supported the findings as it reveals the body was covered in metal pellet wounds. We confirmed this further by locating the spread of pattern on his t-shirt, on his body. It wasn't one piece of evidence alone, but the collaboration of these elements coming together that allowed us to reach this conclusion. Now I'm going to move on to other cases we've been working on recently. During the same period of the revolution in Bangladesh, the Israeli army has been conducting and is still continuing to conduct genocide in Gaza. The Israeli military's ongoing assault reveals layers of violence in real time. It's a daily assault, not only through mass killings, but through the systematic destruction of living sites. Since October 2023, we have been documenting this campaign through a series of public reports. Our October 2024 report, A Cartography of Genocide, found clear evidence of a coordinated strategy to destroy life, the conditions for life, and all life-sustaining infrastructure in Gaza. We use open source verification, satellite imagery, geolocation, 3D reconstructions to map thousands of incidents with forensic precision. In December 2023, the Israeli military published a grid system which was advised as a humanitarian measure for providing evacuation orders to indicate where they should go for safety. This system was immediately contradicted, and instructions mixed between using blocks and numbers and were imprecise and unclear in boundaries. Here you can see a circle on top of a grid, leaving Palestinians in gray zones of ambiguity. A few days later, another irregular shape was published. This is still at the beginning of the genocide. Telling them to go to another neighborhood pointed to only by an arrow. This very, in quotation marks, safe area was then ordered to evacuate the following month. Pushing Gazans further to the south, this same pattern was repeated throughout Gaza until today, where Palestinians are being concentrated into a single area. The humanitarian zones they were using were also contradictory. They shrunk and expanded at will. In mapping them, we can see their inconsistency and contradiction. For example, all these blue blocks that you're seeing have been referred to as the same place all along. This is from 2023. We're also able to show the ground condition of this area, working between data and imagery. And this data of destruction has temporal information too. On a month-by-month basis, we overlaid destruction over time with the humanitarian zone in Deir al-Balah from January 2024. And we see in their overlap evidence that Israel attacked this area during the same period it designated it as a humanitarian zone. We also see that the area told to evacuate to has no functioning hospitals. And to further assess the habitability of this area, we tracked and analyzed the location of each of these essential services on the ground and found that most were damaged. In addition to mapping through analyzing satellite imagery, we geolocated and verified incidents on the ground, mapped them in space and also in time, alongside the mapping of the safe routes, and this is when we found a consistent targeting. To do this, we need several days of finding the incidents, collecting the footage, verifying and locating it, mapping it, and analyzing its timing. This is necessary, and this is the power of temporal and spatial analysis, but at some points, genocide is happening way faster than how we can work. Israel has also repeatedly, time and time again, attacked shelters in areas that it has ordered civilians to evacuate from, including a Nazla school in Jabalia, where 5 women and 5 children were repeatedly killed on the 25th of May. Repeatedly. They were sheltering in an area block outside Israel's designated evacuation zone, but they were targeted. The dissemination of information serves not only to terrorize Palestinians on the ground, but also justify actions to the public, often through the use of misleading maps, by pushing and pulling Palestinians from one area to another, constantly unsettling them from within Gaza. Mind you, Gaza is a population that's 70% refugees from 1948. A state of panic and terror is perpetuated. The spread of disinformation generates an atmosphere of confusion for the people in Gaza, leaving them unable to discern what constitutes as a safe zone, and this disinformation also provides a facade for those witnessing it from afar, masking the crimes with misleading narratives. So the patterns we have observed concerning Israel's military conduct in Gaza indicate a systematic and organized campaign to destroy life, conditions of life, as I mentioned before, and conditions necessary for life. and for life-sustaining infrastructure. And this can be read on and accessed through the Cartography of Genocide, which is one of our largest reports on Israel's genocide in Gaza. However, we have been working on other cases alongside this, also in Gaza. I won't go further on this, but this report is actually around 800 pages. I think it's important to mention that this type of open source research is continuous. Even after the ceasefire that we did have now, I think it's been 5-6 months ago, which wasn't a ceasefire, we continued to document the assault and document how they broke the ceasefire. And this is all documented both on our websites and we're constantly updating on Twitter as well. These actions are often supported and justified through the weaponization of language. Early on in October 2023, the Israeli defense minister ordered a complete siege on Gaza, calling Palestinians human animals. A statement that degrades Palestinians not to the equivalent of animals, but even less than, as an image of a hybrid creature alludes to something that needs to be killed off. The siege meant no power, no food, no fuel, and we see this across multiple contexts. And how here in Bangladesh, Hasina called the students traitors at the start of the revolution. And this weaponization of the language attempts to degrade the actions of dignified resistance. But also, in Gaza, the siege that was placed was also a siege on information. With the destruction of phone and internet connections, this affected the internal communication and the work of medic and humanitarian teams, as well as the communication with the outside world. As a team working remotely, mostly with open source materials and evidence in the public domain, this was a situation where we were working with very little visual evidence coming out of Gaza. Although, if we're really looking at it on a larger scale, there is an abundance of evidence, still, regardless of their attempts to break that connection. Furthermore, our colleagues and collaborators were targeted, including FA's dear friend Rushdie Sarraj. He was the 23rd journalist to be killed since October the 7th. He is the founder of Ain Media Organization. He worked with forensic architecture on the herbicide and Gaza archaeology projects, and was targeted and killed, which was very devastating for a number of my colleagues who were very, very close collaborators with him. One of the cases we worked on with Rushdie is the Gaza's living archaeology case. Along the coastline of a Gaza Strip, beneath layers of rubble, lies one of Palestine's most important archaeological sites. This investigation examined the ancient city of Anthedon, Gaza's first known seaport. The site features Greek, Roman, Hellenistic, Byzantine, and early Islamic structures and artifacts. We used findings from 1995 to 2005, excavations to map both construction and damage to the ancient city, creating 3D renderings of the ruins. The red circles indicate bomb craters and other evidence of damage caused by Israeli forces. So this render and this investigation was before the genocide began. And then after, so in November 2023, our colleagues revisited the case and found that the site was turned into a military outpost. The occupation forces used large vehicles, likely military bulldozers and tanks, to terraform the whole area. Eliminating journalists is eliminating the witnesses. It's eliminating accountability. Rushdie is one of around over 190 journalists who were killed in Gaza since October. And the attack on journalists is not a crime Israel is unfamiliar with. In this video, we see Shireen Abu Akleh, a Palestinian journalist, covering the protests that were in a reaction to the settler invasion in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem. And her journalist colleague, Kavara, that we're going to see just down the same road, was also beaten and arrested just down the street. This is in Sheikh Jarrah. They were both covering the ethnic cleansing in the neighborhood. And this is in 2021. Essentially, they were, these are images from that case. We also did an investigation on the case of Sheikh Jarrah. These images were collected from civilians posting on social media, images directly from the residents of the neighborhood, as well as images from other media platforms. And essentially, they're used together to tell the story of the neighborhood of Jerusalem, where there were disputes over property ownership and evictions. So in 1956, 28 Palestinian refugee families were resettled in Sheikh Jarrah under an agreement between the Jordanian government and UNRWA. And after Israel's occupation of the East Jerusalem in 1967, Israeli property laws allowed Jewish groups to reclaim properties owned prior to 1948, leading to legal battles over those homes. So in 1982, a court recognized Jewish trusts as the owners of this land, granting Palestinian residents protected tenants status. However, disputes over the rent and ownership have persisted, resulting in eviction orders against several Palestinian families, one of which you may know, which is Muhammad al-Kurd. These evictions and the reporting of these cases have sparked international protests since 2021. And on the 11th of May in 2022, Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by Israeli occupation forces. She and 5 other journalist colleagues were targeted by an Israeli marksman. A colleague was injured and she was killed. All witnesses affirmed that they were targeted by Israeli forces that they could see. And the killing of Shireen represents both the killing of Palestinians and the killing of those who report on it. Our partners at Al-Haq, with whom we worked on this case with, one of the oldest human rights organizations in Palestine, was ordered to shut down in the occupied West Bank just 3 years ago. The door of Al-Haq offices in Ramallah were welded shut by IOF on the 18th of August in 2022. And this is before the genocide, again, to re-emphasize. Israel repeatedly attacked the civil society organizations which documented its rights. So the IOF was stationed 200 meters away from Shireen and her colleagues on the street in Jenin. The Israeli state narrative not only denied the killing, but moreover, they released this random footage to disrupt the narrative and flat out lie about what had happened to confuse the public's understanding of the site's dimension. This was quickly disproven as the location of the video was found, and the people in the video were not located in the position that could have possibly led to the killing of Shireen based on her location. But the narrative continued to change, still placing blame on Palestinians without any proof, claiming that they were not identifiable or mistaken, and hit as a consequence of an exchange of fire, never settling on one narrative, always changing the environment that they describe. And months later, the Israeli occupation forces released a report which admit likelihood that an Israeli soldier shot and killed Shireen. But they still blame Palestinians for it anyway, describing the environment as chaotic, with soldiers being attacked, with gunfire and explosives from all directions, that the soldier was aiming at someone, shooting at them in Shireen's direction or in Shireen's vicinity, refusing to even investigate the soldier that killed her. We worked with Al-Haq to reconstruct the events of the day, test the claims of the occupation forces, and assess what evidence there is about the intentionality of Shireen's killing. In the footage, we see this journalist slowly walking up the road with press vests following standard press protocols. Less than a second later, the first round of 6 shots were fired. I muted this just for not to trigger anything, and I didn't create any warnings. We see Ali seeking aid and Shireen seeking cover. Later on, we hear 8 more shots. This is Shireen taking cover behind the tree, and Ali on the other side of the screen. And 8 seconds later, they shoot another round of 7 shots. One of those shots kills Shireen. So again, we documented the scene and built this precise photogrammetry model. We located all the cameras and reconstructed the precise position of the journalists at important moments of the incident through autopsy reports. We also reconstructed Shireen's position when she was shot and where she was shot. We did the same for Ali and also mapped 4 impact points on this tree. We identified and constructed the precise position also of the Israeli forces that we can see from this camera. This is one of the cameras we can see them. We can then know exactly where the hole she was shot from is. We know through open sources that this would have been a professional marksman shooter with an optical scope that magnifies their vision 4 times. We simulated how Shireen and the other journalists would appear to the marksman using their scope. You can all see that their press vests are clearly visible when the marksman began shooting. We verified this by taking a photograph with the same zoom at the same position on the same street. Again, the journalists were clearly identifiable as such, and Shireen was also facing away from them. And the proximity of the known shot position demonstrates repeated and explicit targeting by a professional. We traced the trajectory of the 6 shots that were taken by bringing the shots to a single plane, and we can see from their dispersion. At this distance, we know that the standard deviation would be around 23 centimeters. And basically where they overlap is a possible common aim. All shots were above the shoulder and therefore intended to kill. We then analyzed the marksman's field of vision to understand the timing of their shooting. When Shada was behind the tree, she was shielded from the marksman. Shada is her colleague. When a civilian tries to help Shireen, he's shot at. So through the synchronization of both sound and image and the 3D model, we know that whenever he entered this field of visibility of the marksman, we heard a shot. And this happens 3 times, showing that she was denied first aid. And I mentioned breaking the frame at the very beginning of the presentation. In this context, it becomes very essential for analytical purposes, because we wouldn't have known that he was shot at whenever he entered the marksman's field of vision without the reconstruction of the model. This added layer of evidence would not have been uncovered without the reconstruction of the model. We saw in the footage that there was also no one visible between the IOF position and the journalists, and you can see that we have time-stamped the footages, so we know that both before and after the incident there was no one visible, disproving the state's claims that she was killed in crossfire. This is Shada Hanaisha. We did an on-site testimony with her, conducted by Al-Haq. And here she confirmed the evidence that we found, that there was no one there, and they were shot at with no crossfire whatsoever. She also worked with us to reconstruct her testimony of that day. So, to make sure that what we saw in the videos is also what she remembered and what took place, we had to cross-check ourselves with her testimony. So we see how states use the lack of spatial accessibility to create this imaginary environment that best suits their narrative, one that's in constant flux, molding to what they want us to see. By reconstructing the scene of the incident, the architecture of the event, both materially and temporally, we remove a layer of obscurification leveraged by states to make their claims, allowing the public to see for themselves exactly how it unfolded with this crowdsourced sensibility. So Shireen's funeral procession began at a nearby French hospital in Sheikh Jarrah. And the occupation forces invaded the hospital, beat the mourners, forced the coffin into a vehicle, and set up checkpoints to prevent the funeral from happening. And from there, the funeral was supposed to proceed to the cathedral in the old city, and then the cemetery. And despite these acts of repression, Palestinians gathered in one of the largest processions in recent history, promising to keep her voice and the Palestinian liberation struggle alive. Similarly, Abu Sayyid's funeral was closely monitored by the state, not because it threatened public safety, but because it threatened the state's narrative. What we see in Bangladesh, we also see in Palestine: surveillance and violence from the revolution that escalated not from strength, but from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of the truth, fear of the end that they know is coming. So I just chose this last picture as a final slide that I took at the entrance of Drik. Because whether in Rangpur or Jenin, what frightens the state is not just the protest, but the gathering of the people, the carrying of the body, the bearing of witness, and the solidarity that binds them. Working on this case is not just important as our work with forensic architecture and the collaboration with Drik, but it's important for me personally as a Palestinian, because this work is an act of building bonds, of showing solidarity, and solidarity is what frightens these actors. Even graves are destroyed in Palestine because the Israeli state fears so much the existence of Palestinians that even in their afterlife, they know those graves will haunt them. Thank you.
Well, thank you first for really an incredible presentation and something that relates to us very closely. But let's open it up to the audience. Questions from anyone? While they're waiting, I have a question, a technical question. In the Abu Sayyid documentary that you produced, right at the beginning, there is a policeman who fires, you say, probably at Abu Sayyid, who's out of the frame, and he comes in. Now, later on, we see two policemen. Yeah. Do we know whether that initial shot was fired by one of these two policemen, or was it a third person?
That's a good question. I haven't looked into it, but the person who shot at, and witnesses are the ones who confirmed that it was towards the direction of Abu Sayyid, had a red helmet, bright red helmet, whereas the other two had a different colored helmet. So I'm not sure.
Possibly a third person.
Possibly a third.
A follow-up question. There were 3 shots fired and 2 policemen we saw. Was it these 2 policemen who between them fired the 3 shots?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there were 2 policemen that fired the 3 shots. The first policeman fired the first and the third shot.
Okay.
The second policeman fired the second shot.
Anyone? Please. If you could introduce yourself as well, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sohail Rahman. First and foremost, thank you so much for doing this extraordinary work. That's the first thing. Okay, the second thing, my question, besides the fact that this is deeply moving for me, the struggle in Palestine has been for me personally and my family. I grew up in the U.S., primarily in the Levantine community, although I'm Bengali. So what's happening, what people know now, I mean, this is something, I've known since I was 12. The question that I have is a very, very technical question. I mean, the way you're triangulating, the way you're using the various data points, I'm wondering if it's possible to train, generative AI to basically.
Nick, do you?
So my name's Nick, and I do. I'm a researcher with the focus on technology at Forensic Architecture, and generative AI is a very interesting subject. As you know, it can be a double-edged sword. It can be used for good things and for bad things. One thing that is recently emerged is that, yes, in fact, you can use AI to accelerate and improve the clarity and resolution of 3D scans, for example. So you may have heard of a process which is known as Gaussian splats, which is the idea that you use a kind of point cloud that has a kind of volumetric distribution on all of the points. And those points can be used to represent 3-dimensional space with greater resolution and greater clarity, and perhaps quite importantly, with less computational overhead than previous methods. So I would say that there definitely are kind of like enhancements that are coming down the road with these kinds of things. The real important thing, in my opinion, is that they fall into the right hands and that they're used by civil society groups for this purpose.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Shaikh Mahdi. I'm a prosecutor at the International Crimes Tribunal. So first of all, thank you so much for this analysis. And I can confirm that our investigation is also, corresponds to the findings that you have made. And I would like to inform you that the 2 police officers that you have identified are also in custody, and currently they will face trial. So my question basically is whether we'll be interested, or this institute be interested in working in collaboration with the ICT, because we have some complex cases, particularly in terms of crimes against humanity of enforced disappearances. So these are decades-old crimes where the crime scenes, the detention centers has been dismantled, decimated, and in some way destroyed. All we have is the victim testimonies and some pictures of the current state of the buildings. So it will be very interesting to see if you're interested in a sort of a collaboration to recreate the virtual recreation of some of the crime scenes. We have one reference in the recent world that International Criminal Court have used sort of an immersive recreation of some crime scenes in Africa. So I think it will be an interesting exercise if you consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very interesting. We actually do, how we work is we are usually invited to projects to work on. For example, the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, we were invited by her family to work on this for, and it went to the ICC at The Hague. This video was shown at The Hague. So this is something we would consider in sorts of invitations because we do, our work does end up in courtrooms sometimes. Yeah, I think just send us an email.
I'll just add to that. I actually contacted Forensic Architecture way before the July uprising. I actually visited your office in Berlin to see what they were doing, because I was very interested in the exact things you're talking about. There are a whole range of things where we felt that we could work together, and we've been talking about it since. But of course, with the killing of Abu Sayyid, that became much more tactile and much more specific. But I think what we also need to remember is this process itself is actually part of it. The fact that we are sharing things amongst us, that the audience then knows, and this might lead to other things. And I'll tell you something very interesting that happened yesterday at the opening, because we have some of these photographs from the film itself has been printed, and you will see them downstairs in the exhibition. And there was a gentleman who came up, because it was a high resolution image, he could actually see one of the walkie-talkies on the police. And it transpired that apparently there was a different set that they used to have. With this new set, apparently all the audio transactions are recorded in the mail server. Because we have the timeline, and in fact probably the geolocation, we will be able to identify which policeman had that particular set at that time, find out that audio recording, and therefore get much more tertiary data which can overlap with the information we have. This is something that actually only came up yesterday based on the exhibition and one of the visitors seeing that. So I think this is a continuum, and this process will hopefully lead us there. But exactly, I mean, we reached out to, initially I'd reached out to the Berlin office. Then when this happened, I reached out to Forensic Architecture's email, didn't get a response. Then actually turned up at their office, met them. But it takes a while, and eventually we're here. Any other questions? Anyone?
But just also on that point is that we're also going through this whole process with the workshops as well, that even Drik can end up continuing these
that's something we should point out. We've just today begun a workshop where we've taken a fairly several people who are interested. Of course, they have to have a basic level of skills to be able to participate. But the idea really is that we can build local capacity to be able to do this ourselves. Since then, many others have contacted us who were not able to participate, and we are hoping that through this, we will be able to replicate this ourselves and create the capacity within Bangladesh to be able to do it. In fact, one of the things I was thinking is that because the film itself was so powerful, and it will go to the museum eventually, we thought with the workshop, we might actually make it a regional workshop, because the problem that exists, what has happened in Bangladesh is not unique to South Africa. In fact, it's not unique to the world, not unique to the United States. It's happening in many places. And I think this solidarity amongst the public is something we need to build up, because regimes will always be repressive. They will always behave the way they do, to a greater or lesser extent. And it is up to us to create a situation where they cannot get away with what they do. But let me turn back to questions, please. Anyone?
I'm Rehnuma Ahmed with Drik, and I was thinking of repeating the question I asked Nick, which was, and I think because people might be interested in it, whether it's, since you're both architects, is it essential for the team to have architects when you're doing forensic investigation? Because the workshop, those attending the workshop here, none of them are architects.
Yeah.
And I had another question that's for did you watch the person from ICT? Did you watch the Abu Said film? Okay. There is a shot. Is it the proctor? Is the university proctor in the shot? Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's actually a good question. I know we're called as well forensic architecture, but our team is all multidisciplinary. The actual process of 3D reconstruction, I think it helps that we have that background, but it's not something that can't be learned, especially with the background of photography and the development of technology and having photogrammetry. I don't think photogrammetry was that much used for me when I was in university, actually. But now with the technology we have, we can reconstruct these spaces a lot more easily, with a lot less training. And it's just understanding the space. It's just about understanding the space, and it's understanding how, especially with, if it's a photography background, especially with that kind of background and sensibility, you do begin to make these connections that can easily be reconstructed. And I think it's amazing if it does happen. And that's why these methodologies are actually, we really want them to be not just us, but outside of us. So this work can continue, in the commons. Exactly.
I'll use this opportunity to introduce someone else who was very central to this, Parvez Ahmed. He was one of the key researchers from our end, and he went to Rangpur, did some of the drone footage. Could you tell us something about what you did?
আমি একটু বাংলায় বলছি।
বাংলা বল।
যখন আমি এই কাজটার সাথে সম্পৃক্ত হই তখন আমার জন্য এই মেথোডোলজি এবং এই ফটোগ্রামেট্রি প্রসেসটা একটু একেবারেই নতুন ছিল আমার জন্য, এবং এটা জানা এবং এটাকে বোঝা, এবং আমি একজন ফটোগ্রাফার, কিন্তু যখন আমি বোঝার চেষ্টা করলাম এটা এতই অ্যাকুরেট হতে হবে এবং কাজটা এত কমপ্লিকেটেড, তখন আমি তাদের সাথে 2টা অনলাইনে ওয়ার্কশপ করি এবং আমি বেশ কিছু তাদের টিউটোরিয়াল ফলো করি এবং তাদের সাথে আমার ওয়ার্কশপ করার পর কাজ জমা দিই যেন আমার কাজের তারা ফিডব্যাক দেয়। তো ফিডব্যাক দেওয়ার পর আমি বুঝতে পারি যেন আমার আসলে কোন জায়গায় ঘাটতি আছে, চ্যালেঞ্জ কি। এরপরে আমি আসলে সাইটে যাই। সাইট ভিজিট করার পরে আমি প্রথমে সাইটটাকে আর কি একটা ভাগে ভাগ করে নেই। ভাগ করে নেওয়ার পরে তারা যে মেথোডোলজি প্রসেস ফলো করে সেই ফলো অনুযায়ী আমি আসলে ছবি তুলে যাই। তো সেই ছবি তোলার প্রসেসটাও একটু ডিফারেন্ট, এবং সেখানে শুধু ড্রোন দিয়ে ছবি তোলাও না, এবং সেই ড্রোন দিয়ে ছবি তোলার প্রসেসটা কয়েকটা অ্যাঙ্গেলে এবং কয়েকটা ভাগে তুলতে হয়। সেখানে আমাকে প্রায় 3 দিনে প্রায় 7,500-এর মতো ছবি তুলতে হয়েছে, এবং আমাকে প্রতিদিনের ছবি তাদেরকে প্রতিদিন পাঠাতে হয়েছে। তারা সেটাকে রেন্ডারিং করে দেখেছে সেটা জিও লোকেশন অনুযায়ী ঠিক আছে কিনা। এই প্রসেসের ভিতরে দিয়ে আমাকে যেতে হয়েছে আর কি।
তারপরে তুমি তো লন্ডনেও গেলে, সেটার কথা বলবে?
তো এটা তো একটা ধাপ ছিল যে আমরা 3D মডেলিং করে জায়গাটাকে রিকনস্ট্রাক্ট করলাম, কিন্তু এরপরেও আমরা প্রচুর লোকাল ফটো জার্নালিস্ট এবং ভিডিও ক্যামেরা পার্সন যারা কাজ করেছেন, আমরা যা এর আগে সবাই যমুনা টিভিতে লাইভ দেখেছি এবং এনটিভিতে লাইভ দেখেছি, এর বাইরেও আমরা ভিডিও ফুটেজ দেখে দেখে কারা ভিডিও করেছেন, কারা ছবি তুলেছেন তাদেরকে পয়েন্ট আউট করেছি। তাদের প্রত্যেকের ছবি নিয়েছি, ছবির ম্যাটারটা দেখেছি, ম্যাটারটা দেখে ক্রস চেক করেছি, এবং আই উইটনেস ছিল তাদের সাথে কথা বলেছি। এটাকে আমরা আবার রিভার্স ক্রস চেক করেছি, ও যা বলতেছে সেটা ঠিক আছে কিনা, এবং ওরা যেটা বললো যেন ওরা ছায়া থেকেও টাইম কনফার্ম হতে চেয়েছে আমরা যে টাইমটাকে ঠিক বলছি সেই টাইম ঠিক আছে কিনা। আমরা একটা সময় সবাই যখন এনটিভির লাইভ দেখতেছিলাম, এনটিভির লাইভ বলতেছিল আপনার আবু সাইদ মারা গেছে 2:17 মিনিটে, কিন্তু আমরা আবার হিসাব নিকাশ করে দেখলাম ওইখান থেকে ফেসবুকে আরেকজন লাইভ করতেছিল, তার ফেসবুকের লাইভের টাইম ধরলে 2:16 মিনিটে। তো আমাদের খুব অ্যাকুরেট হওয়া দরকার ছিল, আসলে 3টা গুলি করলো, 3টা গুলি কোনটা কখন করলো। তখন আমরা হিসাব নিকাশ করে বের করলাম, যখন আপনার ওই এনটিভিতে যখন আপনার লাইভ ফিড দিচ্ছিল, লাইভ ফিড রংপুর থেকে ঢাকা স্টেশনে আসতেছে, স্টেশন থেকে আবার আর্থে যাচ্ছে, আর্থ থেকে আমরা টিভিতে দেখতেছি। তো এইটার ভিতরে টাইমের ডিফারেন্স আছে। সেখান থেকে আমরা আবার ফেসবুকের টাইম বের করলাম, ফেসবুকে কখন লাইভ ব্রডকাস্ট শুরু হলো। সেখান থেকে আবার ওই দুইটা ক্যামেরার টাইমের ডিফারেন্সকে আমরা হিসাব নিকাশ করে শ্যাডো মেপে আমরা বের করলাম এক্স্যাক্ট টাইমটা কখন। তো এটা অনেক অ্যাকুরেট আর কি প্রসেসটা। ভিন্ন ভিন্ন টুল আছে, নানা রকমের প্যারামিটার আছে, সেগুলোকে চেক করে ক্রস চেক করে সেটাকে বের করতে হয়।
Any other questions from anyone?
Can I just say I understood some words.
But Parvez was really, really an integral part of this whole process. We worked together along the whole case, from the very, very, very beginning, at every single step. So this also answers your question. We even couldn't do this case as architects without Parvez's knowledge and Parvez's research from Drik's side. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. There is the exhibit itself at level 2, if you've not seen it. Of course, we haven't got a screen as big as this down there, but the film itself is part of that exhibit. And do tell your friends it'll be there till the 26th. Thank you very much. And thank you.
Thank you for having us.